Can Ferrari become the main challenger of McLaren this weekend? What has changed in the SF25 for Hamilton and Leclerc to shine in Silverstone? What happened in the practices of the GP of Great Britain could be the unexpected turn that the season needed. Ferrari arrived in Silverstone with the redeeming pressure after a start of the season full of doubts. From the start in Australia, where the expectations were high with the arrival of Lewis Hamilton and a completely redesigned SF25, reality hit hard. Neither the rhythm in classification nor strategic management were up to the optimistic winter discourse. Hamilton barely adds a point in chaotic conditions, while Charles Leclerc, despite showing speed flashes, was trapped by erratic decisions from the wall that committed their performance. The bewilderment was evident. The car did not respond as in simulation, the updates did not impact how it was promised, and above all, the team transmitted a sensation of structural fragility. Upon arriving in Silverstone, a classic and technical layout where each weakness is exposed without mercy, Ferrari had in his hands the opportunity to validate if he had really taken a step forward or if it was only another mirage. What happened in the practices was more than encouraging. Lewis Hamilton marked the best time in the first free session, and Charles Leclerc placed second in the FP2. It was not a simple quick lap in favorable conditions, but a constant, solid rhythm, especially in high-speed sectors, where the SF25 remained firm, even superior, in front of its main rivals. The interpretation within the team was clear. For the first time in the season, the car operated inside its optimal window without compromising stability. This not only impacted pure performance, but also the morale of the group. In the box, the atmosphere was different. It showed in the faces of the engineers, in radio communication, in the attitude of the pilots. Hamilton, in particular, seemed to reunite with sensations that had been looking for years. His body language when he got out of the car spoke on his own trust. Not from euphoria, but from the conviction that they were finally in the right direction. Silverstone thus became not only a technical performance test, but an essay of psychological resilience. Ferrari needed to respond not only to the stopwatch, but to the growing media criticism that was already beginning to question whether Hamilton's signing was a more than sports maneuver. On Friday of practices in the GP of Great Britain did not solve all the problems, but it left unquestionable certainty. Ferrari was back in the conversation. Not as future promise, but as a real threat. One that McLaren and Red Bull cannot ignore. Unlike previous attempts where the updates were reactive and messy, this time the team opted for a progressive soil reform, a key piece in the generation of aerodynamic load. The modifications implemented in Austria were not simply designed to gain tenths isolated by return. Its purpose was much more ambitious: expand the car operating window and make it predictable. That predictable word became a mantra inside Maranello during the winter. The new SF25 floor included a total contour review of the Venturi tunnels, a reconfiguration of the edge of the diffuser, and a complete redesign of the frontal fences that guide the airflow. Each of these elements not only sought to improve the efficiency of the soil effect, but also reduce the phenomenon of aerodynamic sensitivity that had seriously affected the confidence of the pilots, especially in rapid curves. Before, any change in the march height or at the angle of attack seriously compromised the balance of the car. Now, with a more stable platform, Ferrari has achieved that SF25 can be maintained within constant performance parameters in a greater range of track conditions. This was demonstrated in Silverstone. The British circuit, with its sequence of high-speed curves such as Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel, exposes any structural weakness of the chassis honestly. However, this time the Ferrari not only resisted, but shone. The load generated by the new floor allowed to maintain the perfectly planted front train, which resulted in a more precise direction and a much more aggressive curve input without sacrificing the stability of the rear axle. This last point is not less. The tendency to lose the rear underside load was one of the most notorious Achilles heels of the SF24. Now, that behavior seems to be contained. Not completely eliminated, but controlled. Another substantial improvement was thermal optimization. In the past, Ferrari suffered to keep the Pirelli tires in his optimal window, especially in extreme heat conditions. In Austria, for example, when the asphalt exceeded 50 degrees, the SF25 showed remarkable progress. But in Silverstone, with more moderate temperatures, that management capacity was consolidated. This is critical not only for the rhythm in long batches, but also to extract the maximum of soft classification compounds. The key was in the redistribution of the internal heat flow, particularly in the way in which the brakes and the cooling system interact with the sensitive areas of the front tire housing. Now, although the advance is palpable, Ferrari has not yet achieved perfection. The car continues to show symptoms of nervousness in slow curves, where the traction capacity and distribution of weights play a fundamental role. In low-speed sectors, the SF25 wasting time regarding McLaren. This was especially evidenced in Curve 4, where Lando Norris won up to 0.3 by return. It is an area where Ferrari must continue to work, probably with rear suspension settings and the differential torque distribution, two elements that are not yet fully optimized. The most relevant thing is that, for the first time in the season, the improvements introduced did not generate a negative side effect. On other occasions, gaining stability in an area of the car meant losing agility in another. This time not. The SF25 has grown organically, and that technical growth is beginning to give confidence not only to the pilots, but to the whole environment of the team. Silverstone was not a mirage, it was a successful essay of a plan that has been developing months. The big question now is whether they can maintain this line of progress in the variable conditions that the following calendar races raise. Because the potential is there. It is only necessary to demonstrate that there is also a record. The most fascinating part of this Ferrari resurgence in Silverstone is not found solely in the figures, nor in boxing simulations, but in the human factor. What differentiates a competent technical team from a true contender to the championship is its ability to transfer engineering advances to an environment of trust, collective motivation and synergy between pilot, engineer and strategy. And that, precisely, is what Ferrari is beginning to build with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. The internal dynamics between the two is far from being superficial. It is a point of creative tension that could be the axis that redefines the stage for the team. Lewis Hamilton, with his arrival in Maranello, not only contributed his record, but a methodological approach that Ferrari needed. In his first race with the SF25 in Australia, Hamilton acknowledged that he could not stop the adaptation process. He had to learn the car from scratch, change even his braking style, adopt elements of Leclerc pilot and listen more than he was accustomed. But that effort, that humility to rebuild, has begun to bear fruit. In Silverstone he was comfortable, pushing from the first curve, communicating with engineers with clarity that remembered his best days in Mercedes. His experience allowed us to accelerate fine adjustments in the car and establish realistic reference points for the weekend. On the other hand, Charles Leclerc, although somewhat more reserved in his statements, has had to respond to a new type of pressure. He is no longer the absolute leader of the team. The first sword status is no longer secured, but that has caused a positive reaction in it, less speculation and more results. In Silverstone's training, it was consistently fast, taking full advantage of track windows, with precise driving that denotes increasing comfort with the new characteristics of SF25. Despite being more critical of car behavior in certain sectors of the circuit, his rhythm was strong and his work with the equipment in the management of tires solid. It is no coincidence that, at times, it has been at Hamilton level, even exceeding it in certain sectors. The most valuable thing about this relationship between the two pilots is that they are forcing the team to upload their standard. There is no room for strategic errors or improvisations. Each session counts, each lap is a data point, each decision on the wall is now evaluated with magnifying glass. And that pressure, well managed, is exactly what a team needs that wants to return to the top. Ferrari no longer operates from the urgency of the past, but from the opportunity. They have two pilots capable of fighting for poles and victories, but also two strong egos that, if they are handled with intelligence, can be fuel instead of dynamite. In the future, Silverstone represents a declaration of intentions. It does not guarantee anything but aligned traces. If Ferrari can repeat this level of execution on more demanding paths such as Hungary, where heat and slow curves will test their Achilles heel, then the panorama of the season will change completely. They would stop being the third actor in a battle between McLaren and Red Bull to become legitimate protagonists. The key will be to maintain this technical progression while reinforcing the human structure behind the machine. Because the SF25 can evolve, but the true transformation begins from the heart of the team. The great unknown is whether this level of cohesion can be sustained under real pressure, when errors cost championships and not just points. For now, Ferrari has given clear signs that he is ready to fight. But the real test will begin when the traffic lights go out on Sunday and face to face with the reality of the race rhythm. Then we will know if this rebirth is legitimate, or if Silverstone was just a respite in the middle of the long road to the top. What we saw in Silverstone was more than a simple Good Friday for Ferrari. It was a signal. A possible break with the narrative of frustration, broken promises and evolution that never concretized. For the first time in a long time, the Italian team not only fulfilled what it promised in the technical communications, but also transferred those improvements to the track with a clean and competitive execution. Hamilton and Leclerc found in the SF25 a reliable tool, a machine that responds when it is required, and that could be the beginning of a completely new cycle in Maranello. But there is an open question, and perhaps it is the most important of all. Can Ferrari convert this perfect Friday on a pole Saturday and a podium Sunday? Because the difference between a team that evolves and one that competes by titles is in constancy. It is not enough to shine a session, not even a weekend. You have to sustain the performance, adapt to different types of circuit, manage the championship pressure, and above all, avoid self-complacency. Now is your turn to answer. Do you think Ferrari has finally found the right path? Or do you think that McLaren and Red Bull continue to have a structural technical advantage that is not erased with a good free practice? And if you are interested in deepening the design of the new SF25 floor, the soil effect tunnels, and why its load redistribution is beginning to make a difference in fast curves, make sure you are subscribed.